We're getting back on track here with Catherine and Emily, but as you know, we won't stay there for long because this is the Going Off Track podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I'm Catherine. That's Emily. We are knee deep in preseason, but it's been a minute since we've recorded an episode.
I know, I almost messed up the timing. I'm like, wait, what do I do again when we start this podcast? Oh yeah, I do the twinkle fingers. But it's been a long time, and I feel like we've been so inactive this off season because we didn't have all of the, Lewis Hamilton car kerfluffles like we did last year. There's just been, little bits and pieces here and there, but not a lot.
No, I mean, you have been rightfully very busy lately. So we haven't been able to really cover a lot of the stuff that has gone on. But on a positive side, there has been a lot less that's gone on compared to this time last year. Because last year, there was news breaking every 10 minutes.
Bombs were dropping left and right. And I feel like you're right. But I feel like it's a smattering of small things this offseason, where last offseason it was just like big thing, big thing, big thing. And now it's just like, I don't know, little droplets of F1 news for us to enjoy, to keep us tided over.
Yeah, obviously we've had, big things like the F1 75 livery launch, and we've had a little bit of drama with the FIA over the off season because curse words are bad and stewards are getting fired and all these things that we will talk about. But it has been a mellower off season compared to last year's off season, which was just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, we do actually have a lot to talk about just because we haven't recorded in a couple of weeks, so we will kind of give you guys the updates.
For the hour and a half long episode.
It will not be, because I do not have the capacity to talk that long after working high school basketball for the better part of the last 3 days. So
over under, Catherine. I bet a cookie that we're over an hour. Let's say that.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me, but spoiler alert, if we do, the editor is going to cut the episode in half.
Well, then you're cheating on this bet. It gotta make it an equal playing field.
I'm just saying that for the sake of your listening ability, listeners, this might be 2 episodes crammed into one that is going to be split up. So we'll see. TBD.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, how you been, Catherine? I feel like I haven't seen you in forever. And I know you've been just throwing me F1 news left and right while I've been head in the sand working my god-awful busy season. But how have you been? How's life?
I've been good. I have also been in busy season, but with sports rather than with what you do in your real world life. So I have just been working lots of sports, and I am in my busy season until, I don't know, the end of the next 2 weeks, and then it's pretty much all Formula One from here on out.
I'd say that's another busy season though. Once it gets started. And I feel like we don't have the god-awful 7-week breaks this year like we did last year, so.
Yes, though I will admit that I don't have all of the races in my calendar yet, which is okay because the season hasn't started. It will get in there by the time we get to Australia, and then we will actually know what the distances between races are. But from what I do remember, the first time I looked at the calendar, I was like, okay, it is spaced a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't say a little bit. I would say a lot of it.
Yes.
We had so many breaks last year, which is fair. We're not the ones sitting in a car. We're just the ones sitting, on couches
on a couch.
At home. Exactly. So it is nice for them to get a break. Very well deserved. But I don't know. I feel like I find myself in lulls. If it's too long, I'm like, oh, well, over it. Let's flip our attention to something else. Or when it's every weekend or every other weekend, I'm just so locked in. So I feel like they lose their audience a little bit. And with them making this a whole entertainment value thing, I don't know. Maybe they think about it. Maybe they start the season later.
Well, the season is starting later this year.
But it doesn't seem like it's that much later though.
It's a whole week, 7 whole days.
It's a week.
so yes, but I think the other issue is that, we have the summer break, and typically in years past, the summer break in Formula One has been the longest break between races at about, 4.5 weeks. But then this past year, we had 3 summer breaks all within like the summer break to end of year portion of the calendar.
Yeah.
So that really made it going from, consistently having races, consistently having stuff going on. Then you have the predictable summer shutdown where you also do have a lot of news. Like that's when Carlos announced that he was going to be going to Williams. And then you had 2 more 3-week breaks in between 6 races. And it just kind of made things feel a little weird for a while.
Well, I feel like it just drags out the season. You know what I mean?
Also that. Yeah. Like sometimes it feels like the Formula One season should end around Thanksgiving and not like the middle of December.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate what they're trying to do, but I don't know. It's never going to be perfect. We're never going to be happy, but we can say much about it.
And we
I
will.
think that's our theme.
Our theme is complaining.
It's not going to make us happy, and we will complain about it. You're welcome.
Because inevitably, they will manage to screw up in some other way.
Exactly. That is the brand of F1.
Pretty much.
Okay, so like we said earlier, I've been head in sand, super busy, not able to sleep, let alone think of F1. I catch a little bit on Instagram from when Catherine sends me DMs or when I'm doom scrolling, on my walk around the building. But this is going to be a fun episode for Catherine to catch all of us up on the news, including myself. You're welcome. But with that, Catherine, I think we can jump in because we're already several minutes in and we don't want to make this our hour and a half episode. So
correct. So
what did we talk about the episode before this? It was all about Jack Doohan, right?
Yeah, it was our Jack Doohan is totally screwed episode, and I think some people got a little bit upset with us, which I don't understand why, because we were not the only people to say that Jack is screwed, and unfortunately, the fact is that he is. So we talked about the fact that Alpine not only hired 1 reserve driver, they hired 3 reserve drivers, including Formula One fan favorite Franco Colapinto, who we all know subbed in at Williams and made a splash, almost got signed with Red Bull before he had a really rough end of the season, et cetera, et cetera. You all lived through this, and if you haven't, watch our old episodes. But the thing is when you have Pierre Gasly and Jack Doohan, you know that if you have 3 capable reserve drivers, even though I do feel that one of those reserve drivers really has no chance of getting a seat, the other one alongside Colapinto that I think will eventually have a chance to get to Formula One is Paul Aaron, who he did really well in the lower series last year. But the problem is the second somebody sets a toe out of line, their head is going to be on the chopping block, and it's not going to be your French phenom Pierre Gasly, who you have made so many efforts to keep and make happy by getting rid of Esteban Ocon, who has gone to Haas. So it really is going to be with Jack Doohan. And after our episode had come out, the team principal at Alpine, Oliver Oakes, kind of responded to the allegations that Jack only had a 6-race contract, which we still really don't know the details of his contract. And we won't, correct. But Oliver Oakes came out and said that Doohan will have a fair shot at his seat this season, which is all well and good. And as a team principal, I really do like Oliver Oakes. I like what he brings to the team. The problem is Oliver Oakes is and continues to be undermined left, right, and center by Flavio Briatore, who, as we know, is F1's villainous villain.
He's a monster.
And was rightfully banned for life from the sport for Crashgate. And it's really difficult to believe what Oliver Oakes says when Oliver Oakes says something like, oh, the plan was for Esteban Ocon to race in Abu Dhabi and then go straight to testing with Haas. And then we find out that Briatore said, no, we're going to make this a negotiation and we're going to make it really uncomfortable, but Ocon is going to leave before Abu Dhabi. He's not going to be able to partake in the festivities because I am going to leverage his ability to test with Haas immediately after the season in postseason testing. And we're going to give Jack Doohan his seat for the last race of the year. So no matter what Oliver Oakes says, we can't believe what he's going to say. And we saw this, and we'll talk more about the Drive to Survive trailer later. But Flavio Briatore is probably going to screw Jack Doohan over. And it's very unfortunate, and I don't want to see it happen. But that doesn't mean the writing's not on the wall.
Oh, I was literally just about to say I think the writing's already on the wall. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I did think about this after we recorded, and I was thinking, like, because Flavio is kind of that guy, that villain that we all love to hate, I could totally see him just kind of like scooping up all of the possible reserve drivers and just a big FU to everyone else in F1 of like, you have no one else, you have no other options, you have to come to us to negotiate contracts. Like, I could see him having that mindset, but at the
Which
same
is honestly
time,
what they tried to do with Oscar.
right, exactly.
In the first
and
place.
That's why, exactly. So that's like in the back of my mind, but also him, I mean, I know we're going to talk about Drive to Survive in a little bit, but the fact that he's come out and said, like, I control everything that you do, like, if Jack says one bad thing in an interview, I feel like he's going to be pulled. I mean, and I hope we get to see the inner workings of what happened with Esteban Ocon in Drive to Survive. We probably won't. I'd love to, because I think that would be really telling to how things will carry over to Jack. Like, if he treats one driver this way, he's going to treat all of them that way. And like you said, Oaks seems like a great TP, but he's just a puppet. Like, he truly has no authority. So,
and he's probably going to get fired at Spa anyway.
Exactly. I'm just counting down the days till Spa when they have a new team principal. But,
yeah.
you know.
So it's not that we want this to happen, but
No,
this is
just
what this is what the writing on the wall is, which is incredibly unfortunate and really sucks for Jack, because he's coming into the season already with stakes higher than any rookie on the grid. Like, Kimi Antonelli can spin out 3 of 5 races and he'll be fine.
Honestly, I think Kimi could have 3 seasons of not great performance. Like, because they're just going to say he's really young, he's learning, we're throwing all our weight behind him, he's growing, yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
But like, Jack has 3 bad races, and I think he's done. I think that's his fair shake of having like a handful of races. I really do. And that's also what's really annoying, is they came out and said, oh, he'll have his, a fair opportunity as his seat. But that is such a relative statement. Like, to them, a fair shot could be like 2 or 3 races, where to some people it would be a whole season because he's a rookie. So it really bothers me that he came out and said, like, oh, no, it's going to be a fair shot. But like, define that. Please put that in writing of like what it is. And I know it's in the contract, but we'll never know. I guess we don't need to know, but I would like to know. Again, I'll complain.
We're just really nosy about these things.
We are. I must know these things.
Yeah.
But
so
anyways, that kind of ties our bow on Jack Doohan.
Yeah, that is our last additional thoughts so far on Jack Doohan. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the rookies when we put out our predictions episode for the season, which will come out before the season starts at some point, TBD. But moving on and sticking with the Mercedes side of things, one of the things that we actually haven't talked about is Valtteri Bottas is sticking around in Formula One because he has signed on to become the Mercedes reserve driver. And with everything that had happened at the end of last season, we forgot to mention that. But this is exciting because it means that he's still going to be around in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of saw this coming.
The writing was on the wall.
That's just...
Or no. The writing was on his thigh.
Exactly.
Tattooed to his thigh, which did he really need to tattoo what's next to his thigh when we knew what's next was going to be going back to Mercedes?
Yeah, and like, that's the thing. We speculated on what was going to happen when deep down we all knew, like, it was inevitable, right? He's going back to Mercedes. And I know you said that's good because he sticks around on the grid, but honestly, unpopular opinion maybe, I'm kind of over Valtteri Bottas. Like, I get it. It's a whole shtick, whatever. But, like, I feel like he's just trying too hard at this point. Like, at first it was original, right? He was just the Finnish driver being a Finnish driver. Haha, la-di-la. But now I feel like he's really leaned into it to the point where it's just an insane gimmick now. And it's, like, no longer authentic or funny. To me, it's just, like, it's trying too hard. The whole what's next thing. I was like, I get it. I see what you're doing. It's not for me.
I just think that he did not need to tattoo it to his thigh, but, to each his own. But to your point is, I think that he will be, paring back a little bit of the Bottas-ness, because among other things, Toto and the Mercedes engine as a whole has told Bottas that he cannot do another nude calendar.
Which makes sense. It's not the brand.
No, it is really not the
it's
Mercedes brand.
the steak brand is like literally, the
steak brand is gambling.
Yeah, the steak brand is like lowbrow, which maybe that's rude for me to say, but it is compared to like Mercedes. Mercedes wears crisp white shirts on the grid, like they are Mercedes, and if Valtteri wants to be a part of that, he has to conform. Like that's nothing new. I mean, sports teams across the world in every different sport, their team has a culture and they have a fit, and if you don't want to play along, then you're out. And I think, good for Valtteri for saying he wants to stick around and he'll conform, but it's not surprising to me. And I'm not going to knock Mercedes either because that's their brand, that's who they are, which good for them.
Yeah, I'm actually. It's funny that you brought that up with other sports because the Yankees did recently announce.
Yes, after like the start of baseball, they've never been allowed to have facial hair, and finally, like they can have facial hair, which is wild because it's 2025. But they've changed their brand. They've changed with the times, and you know what? Maybe in 10 years we will have Toto nude calendars as well, because that's the way that they want to take the brand. But for right now, we're no facial hair for Mercedes, and that's just how it is.
No facial hair, quote unquote. But in this case, no facial hair is no naked calendars. And while it is a little bit unfortunate because the naked calendar was for a good cause,
yes,
Bottas will find something else absurd within the constraints of Mercedes to do, and they are letting him keep the mullet. So there's that.
Go.
Not that I really think the mullet does much for him, but that's completely unrelated.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Another thing I want to talk about, because I feel like this was a hot button topic that everyone, including us, talked about last year, the stewards.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's been movement, so catch me up on this. I know I've seen glimpses here and there, but head, rock, dead.
Right.
So what is the movement in the offseason from the stewards?
There's been a lot of really interesting things, and I feel like there are a lot of layers to what's been going on. And now we've obviously seen a lot of stuff about the race steward. So I think going back to basics to start with understanding the concept of stewards and the role that they have within Formula One in very short is that this is a volunteer organization that varies from track to track, race to race, and is a lot of motorsport experts that are brought in from, locally, so that you don't have, you're not taking some guy who lives in Brazil and making him go all around the world for a year, because it's hard enough for teams to take their own personnel around the world for a year. The steward job is primarily a thankless, unpaid volunteer position. And go.
Can we pause there? So,
yes.
Not necessarily ask, but more of a statement. Like, what professional league sport in the world has volunteers refereeing or judging, for lack of better terms, their sport? There are none, because it's asinine and it's stupid. Who cares if some guy from Brazil has to fly to Azerbaijan? Like, I don't. Sorry,
I don't disagree, and so
brand.
I wrote this up differently, but let's start with the stewards should be full-time and not paid volunteers. And that came from not my favorite team representative, Zach Brown of McLaren, who said that teams should be willing to pony up for salaries to have full-time paid stewards, especially when it comes to the people who are responsible for things like in-race penalties, where we very publicly had a steward who had been dismissed, and this was the steward who gave Max his penalties in COTA in Mexico that many people thought were overly harsh from when Max was fighting with Lando. And so that steward had been dismissed. And so Zach Brown is right. And these guys that are responsible for major penalties and things that lead to points on a super license, which of course, as we know, thank you to Kevin Magnussen, can lead to things like race bans and suspensions, is, that's really important to have for the growth of the sport. And sure, having unpaid volunteers was one thing when Formula One was a lot smaller than it is now, but it's grown to the point where we need more paid oversight to keep things consistent from track to track and race to race.
Right. And like you said, this season we saw penalties change the outcome of races.
Right.
Which, like, yes, every year someone drops from, like, what, P8 to P11, like, great. But I feel like this year especially, or I guess last year, there were so many that really affected the outcome of the Drivers' Championship, of the Constructors' Championship, that it wasn't like a resounding, yes, that was a penalty. And for something to be so important to the outcome of races and the outcome of the season, I don't understand how you don't have paid staff. F1 brings in so much money. The teams bring in so much money. The FIA brings in so much money. Like, I don't know who is paying for them, but we need to have paid stewards. And I'm even fine regionalizing them. Like, have a set group, 3 set groups, right? Europe, Middle East, Asia, and then
the Americas.
Like, that's pretty evenly split, right? So they don't have to travel a ton. Someone from Brazil is only furthest they're going is Montreal, Canada, right? Actually, Vegas might be further. I digress. But, like, it wouldn't be as big of a leap to have that versus one set of stewards. Like, one set, obviously we would have better consistency, but still, if you have a paid position, I think they will also take it more seriously because of the threat of losing their job. Like, this volunteer steward isn't doing anything. Like, he messes up, oh, he's dismissed. Like, there is no repercussion. If it's a paid position, you're losing your job. And, like,
Right.
how embarrassing is it to be, like, fired as a steward? Like, no one else is going to hire you. You know what I mean?
And the other thing about this is, and this was made more blatant this past season, specifically with Max's 2 10-second penalties, is, and this was agreed upon with the drivers, is the drivers as an association, the Grand Prix Drivers Association, decided with F1 and with the FIA that, you know, driver penalties in race needed to be more impactful. So instead of a 5-second penalty for Kevin Magnussen, you know, playing bumper cars with Esteban Ocon, it's now a 10-second penalty. Same with, you know, Max pushing Lando off track. So that's why these penalties are now not just 5-second penalties added onto each other. They're 10-second penalties and things like that. The drive-through penalty is something that should not have been revived, but that is a whole other bag of cats. But at the same time, we do need to have a little bit more consistency, track to track, and your idea of regionalizing it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, agreed. I don't like that we're agreeing with Zach Brown. I feel like that's just sacrilege religious, but even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
A stop clock is right twice a day. But speaking of stewards that are out, and obviously this is the biggest one of the winter break, is Johnny Herbert, former F1 driver, current Formula One commentator, also Formula One steward, the guy who was responsible for giving Max those penalties. He is out as a race steward because the FIA deemed that his activities as a media commentator were incompatible with his stewarding duties, which, heaven forbid, I agree with the FIA. They have it right, actually.
Hell hath frozen over.
Correct. This is like me liking something that Lewis Hamilton does, which we'll talk about that later. But, like, I don't disagree. Like, if you are a media pundit, that means you are having opinions. We, as quote unquote media pundits, are sitting here having opinions about Formula One. Yeah. And that is going to influence our ability. If we were also serving as race stewards, it would influence how we feel about giving penalties. There's no way to say, oh, you know, I think Max is a really dirty driver, but I am going to be neutral when I give him these 10-second penalties.
I can just see you, Catherine. Lewis Hamilton, 1.5-hour penalty. Why? Because he is Lewis Hamilton.
Because he annoyed me with his radio statements. Like, that is, you know, yes, it's Johnny Herbert. Yes, he did it forever. Yes, he's been, you know, a key player in the sport for many, many years. But I think that it is fair that he had to choose. Now, did the FIA kind of dick him around and say, okay, everything's cool for 2025, and then all of a sudden, you know, Mohammed bin Sulayem woke up and said, this is actually a problem, and I need something to take away from the fact that I'm going to ban drivers when they say the, you know, oopsie words by accident. So, which is a whole other thing. We'll get to that in a minute. But I do think that in this case, Herbert should have recused himself of his stewarding duties when he decided to be a media pundit.
Agreed. Okay, I want to go off track here because you brought up something that I just want to like drop a bomb on because it's very exciting to me. Have you've seen the rumors that Susie's going to run for president of the FIA?
I have seen it. I don't know how much I believe it.
But like, I want to believe it.
I do too, because I want somebody who is going to oust Mohammed Ben Sulayem, who I do not like and think is trying to become the next Bernie Ecclestone in a really bad way. And obviously, you know, everybody says so many nice things about Bernie Ecclestone because he was responsible for getting Formula One to the point where Stefano Domenicali, the current president of F1, has taken it and run. But Mohammed Ben Sulayem needs to go, and that also leads to a lot of thoughts about Middle Eastern investment into sports and Formula One is specifically, which we're not going to go into because it's a lot of thoughts that we are not going to have in this episode and a lot of thoughts that we're just not going to put out there in here in general. But I would love for somebody to take over for Mohammed Ben Sulayem, and I think Susie would do a good job.
Okay, so here's my follow-up on this. So she already had an investigation to being independent, right? And like having issues. So do you think her marriage to Toto would prevent her from becoming FIA president?
I think it would be difficult. I think that Susie and Toto have shown through that investigation that they are able to keep things separate. And I think that there would be a lot of eyes on it. But would it be the end of the world? No, I don't think so.
I think, unfortunately, the optics of it is going to prevent her from ever doing more than she is while Toto's still involved at Mercedes.
Yeah, and then there's also the woman problem.
Exactly. Like, if this example, if Daddy Stroll all of a sudden decided he wanted to be the president of the FIA, right? Got rid of Aston Martin, it was no longer his, but like Lance was still driving, I think they'd be like, great, Daddy Stroll, yes, please be our president, even though your son is a driver.
Yes.
But like, and honestly, even if Toto like took a step back from the team, which he's been taking a little bit more of a step back, I think they'd still be like, Susie, you're too close.
Well,
you know what I mean?
the other issue, and this is not really an issue, but this is a fact, is Toto is a majority stake owner in the team.
Right,
so it's
even
not
if he
just
leaves the team but still owns it, I don't think she would ever be able to.
Exactly. It's like James Vowles doesn't have ownership in Williams.
No.
In the group that owns Williams now. So if his wife wanted to become the president of the FIA and he left Williams, it would be fine because he still wouldn't have any ties. Even if Toto wasn't team principal anymore, he still owns the team. He's still going to be involved in multiple day-to-day operations, and Susie would still be Susie Wolff.
I know, which is so unfortunate.
I think she'd do a good job.
But I think she would do incredible.
But also, I think keep her with F1 Academy. I think that she should stick with F1 Academy until the F1 Academy gets a female driver onto the grid full time.
I agree, because I think no one's going to fight for F1 Academy to succeed the way that she does.
Right. Which she is doing so many great things.
Back because I think she can do so many great things, but I think she's really found a niche, and like this, and like getting a female driver to the F1 grid like is her great thing goal. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think because not to go on too off track and on a tangent, but
yeah, I mean, we'll talk about F1 Academy later because the 2025 grid is shaping up. We have people, we have some new things going on. We have some new sponsorships. It's all very exciting over there, but we'll get there, once we get a little bit closer to their season opener. But yes. I do think that the rumors that I'm seeing, like, I just don't necessarily think that they're factual, which
is fine. It's still just starting a conversation, and I think that's what's interesting about it is like people coming around to her, because like we love Susie, she's amazing, but never would I have been like, oh, she should be the FIA president. You know what I mean? So I think it's just getting people's minds turning, and maybe it's completely bluegrass roots to get her into that position and that conversation, which again I think is great. I think having more women in motorsport is a great thing. But yeah, I'm with you on it's not probably factual, which is fine. But at least we're having a conversation about it. And it's, more women in F1, which I think is great.
Yeah. Speaking of women in F1 in a different role, we do have our first female race engineer on the grid this season, which I do think is very exciting. So Laura Mueller will be Esteban Ocon's race engineer this year at Haas. She's been with Haas since 2022. She's been involved with motorsport for a while. And this is, we've had a lot of, high-ranking females in the sport. Hannah Schmidt, who is one of the senior, engineers at Red Bull. Obviously, Claire Williams was the team principal, but this is our first female race engineer, which I think is really cool and really exciting. And it's Haas, so we'll see how it goes.
I was just going to say, look at Haas breaking down barriers, but they probably didn't even have the barriers up because they can't afford them.
No, but they are going back to the full-size pit wall this year.
I saw that. Oh my God. Oh, I was just
so clearly
their
their financial issues have been resolved in some sense.
Maybe. Who knows? But yeah. Also, okay, so this is the last thing we can talk about before we kind of like jump into liveries, helmets, everything. But, and this has really nothing to do with anything F1, it's an off-track thing that I keep seeing and I'm obsessed with. Carlos Sainz is now a global ambassador for L'Oreal Paris, and I'm obsessed. I think it's such a great, role for him. Honestly, I think he's really stepping out of his shell now that he's leaving Ferrari. I feel like that's just something that happens when you leave Ferrari. You actually, get your soul and personality back. Hello. But it's really exciting. I don't exactly know what products he's promoting. I'm assuming it has to do something with shampoo and conditioner because that man's hair is better than anyone's. It's perfection. It looks better after a helmet for some reason. I don't know how. But I think it's really interesting, really cool. I think it's really great for Williams too to have such a marketable driver to really bring money in. I mean, he brought Santander with him, which I think is great. He did bring Santander, right?
Yes.
He brought Santander with him, which I think is great for them. That's cash infusion, money rules everything. He is now a global ambassador. His face is out there. He's very recognizable. I mean, he's going to be on a show. Who is it with? Stanley Tucci.
Yeah.
Yes. He's on a cooking show, which I think is great. So he's really marketing himself. He's getting himself out there. And I think it's only going to really help Williams. And he even came out and said, I'm not going to win. Yes, I'm doing great in testing, but I'm not going to win. People need to just chill about that. But I came here to invest my time and really pull, all of the strings tight and together so that we are the Williams of old and things. And that comes with bringing in money and sponsorship. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of Williams.
Yeah, and not only that, but Williams does have a new title sponsor this year. And I really think sticking with Carlos becoming a global ambassador to a major brand, I think it's really important and I think it's really key for him as a Formula One driver. We know within the sport that Formula One drivers are top tier athletes in the world, but when you look at drivers in motorsport who are also global brand ambassadors, there's really not a lot of crossover in that Venn diagram. So to have Carlos be one of those guys along with, Lewis Hamilton, that's a really huge stepping stone for Carlos in his career, and also further separating him from Carlos Sainz Sr. and everything that Sr. has done in his career, and also the 18 other Carlos Sainzes in the family because they all have the same name. But have to bring that up every chance we get. But I think
all
that
it's the Carlos Sainzes.
But I think it's really great that Formula One and Formula One drivers are becoming people are becoming more aware of them outside of just, people who are regional motorsport fans or people who are fans of these athletes in the countries that they're from. Checo Perez has this massive backing of people in, Mexico and Latin America. And so this is Carlos stepping out of Spain, stepping out of Formula One and going international, which is where pretty much all of Formula One is going at this point.
Right. And I have friends who couldn't tell you what Formula One was. Maybe they could tell you that Ferrari was a team, but that's about it. And that's because they saw the Ferrari movie. But I've had friends send me I don't know if it was Dumois or something of his campaign, because the campaign is also with one of the girls from Bridgerton, and I can never remember any of them because there's like 1,000 actors in the
Simone
ensemble.
Ashley.
Yes, Simone Ashley. And they're like, oh my God, he's an F1 driver. Do you know who he is? He's so hot. I'm like, yes, of course I know who
Yes,
Carlos
I
Sainz
do.
is.
Say less.
Like, yes. But I think it's really interesting that, and maybe we can, attribute it to there now being 3 races in the US, so they're expanding their reach on things. But I just think F1 in general, backed by Drive to Survive, is becoming much more globally accepted and more exciting. And that's why they're having these global ambassadors and different things like that. But I think it's great for the sport. It's growing it. And again, more eyes, more money, that can only be good for them. So
yeah,
I think we have a lot to see.
In the United States, it's becoming more mainstream as a sport. Like, I had someone, like one of my best friends, she sent me a blind from Dumois. I think it was about Lando. And she's like, I don't know if you're interested in blinds, but this is a Formula One driver, right? And I'm like, yes. And
Yeah.
I don't even remember what it was about, but it was something related to Lando. And like, to have Formula One drivers end up in one of like the biggest, gossipiest blinds, Instagram accounts, on the platform.
My worlds
they're
are
doing
colliding, Catherine.
Right, exactly. And it's like Esteban Ocon was in this like French rom-com.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love
like he has a cameo in a French rom-com. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton, voiced one of the cars in Cars or something, and that's like Liam Lawson's dream is to become a Cars car, and just be his own vehicle, buddy. I mean, we never know. As the more he talks about it, the more he might manifest that into existence. But it's
also, I am gonna fact check you really quickly because Fernando Alonso is also the voice in a Cars, but for all of the Spanish-speaking countries, and like so every driver with a different and then Sebastian Vettel was the voiceover in Germany. So it wasn't just Lewis Hamilton.
I'm going to confess here, I've never seen any of the Cars movies.
It's okay, we forgive you.
Thanks. So yes, so Formula One is becoming incredibly globalized, and I think that is really great and really exciting.